Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Well, the 2020 presidential election is heating up, and we now have over 20 candidates in the race on the Democratic ticket alone. That's not counting the Libertarians and the Green Party and any other sort of independent that is choosing to run for the presidency. So, there are going to be a lot of personalities. It's a very crowded field. And when you have something of that nature, it leads to what we can sort of refer to as a very, very ripe season for conspiracy theories to formulate. We've talked a lot about conspiracies on this channel and how they function. And in the second upload I ever did for BBOR back in 2017, we kind of made the statement that conspiracy theories are not just sort of single ideas. I mean, like 9/11 truth is not just 9/11 was an inside job. The Kennedy assassination is not just the CIA killed him or something like that. It's like a spectrum of ideas. And you ask, where does the theorist fall into the spectrum of ideas, for example? Like 9/11, the Kennedy assassination, the ones we just mentioned, there are numerous possibilities. Even if you just look at the most mild version, where you're saying something like, the government might have had some prior knowledge and didn't do anything about it. You could apply that to JFK or the Kennedy assassination. That would be a very mild version of a conspiracy theory. And you actually find, though, that those mild versions, even though they are a little bit mundane, and they probably don't get talked about too much on YouTube, but those mild versions of the theories, that just the government had some knowledge and they didn't do anything, those are the ones that probably have a higher likelihood of not only being true, but a higher likelihood of actually getting followers to come along to that. You ask the average person, what do you think about that? They might be agreeing to some of those very mild conspiracy theories. Well, how do we apply something like that to the 2020 presidential election? Right now it's 2019. We're going to be dealing with the primaries before we get to the general election. And what we can say about that is there's been a lot of talk about what's going on with the mayor of South Bend, none other than Pete Buttigieg, a Rhodes Scholar, speaks 7 languages. I mean, a former veteran, we should also say. I mean, he is a veteran, to kind of rephrase that sentence. A lot of people are just wondering, like, how is he rising in the polls so fast? I mean, how is he climbing up to the national spotlight? How does he get there so quickly? And one of the things that I really get skeptical of when someone is like really rising very quickly, when someone is sort of a new coming star to the Democratic Party, especially somebody like Pete Buttigieg, who was not really that well known on the national scene prior to 2016. In 2017, though, even on the list of potential candidates for the Democratic Party, this was published on Wikipedia, Pete Buttigieg was listed as a potential candidate. It's not like he just came out of nowhere. This was something that had been planned for a long time. That's why I get skeptical to start thinking that there are very strong financial connections behind his campaign, that political action committees are behind his campaign, and you might be thinking about PACs and super PACs. Yeah, big deal. They always use those, right? Well, it's about the intention. It's about the motivation. What is this candidate doing? What role are they playing? And what is the ambition of the super PAC? We've mentioned a variety of sources of that deal with conspiracy theories in the past on this channel, and one of them was that in 2011, Ron Paul ran for the presidency as a way to just kind of divide the vote in the Republican primary so that Mitt Romney could win. By that we mean Ron Paul was taking away votes from Rick Santorum and John Huntsman and Michelle Bachmann, that so people would either vote for Ron Paul or not vote at all, and then Mitt Romney would actually rise in the polls because other voters wouldn't be voting for the opposition, putting the votes in an untouchable place, putting the votes in a deep freeze. And the first person to talk about this was Webster Tarpley. That's the guy we mentioned on the channel before. So, the point is, Just because someone is running in the presidential election does not mean that they are in it to win it. And it doesn't only mean that they want to bring ideas to the platform or that they want to improve their own career. People could be running purely because they are paid operatives. People could be running purely to kind of do the bidding of somebody else. Is Pete Buttigieg that kind of person? I'm not necessarily sure 100%. I mean, I'm not working for the Democratic Party right now. I'm definitely not an insider, but I get very, very skeptical when someone who is only the mayor of South Bend begins rising in the polls so fast. I was very skeptical when Wayne Messam, the mayor of Miramar, Florida, declared his candidacy for the presidency, and he started getting national attention, being mentioned on all the news networks, being on CNN. There are many candidates that are running for president that do not get mentioned on CNN. Why? Because they're perennial. They're just like, they don't get the time of day. Have you heard of Bill Bays running for the presidency? Granted, he's doing it from the Prohibition Party, not the Democratic Party. But it's like, you don't get a platform on CNN just because you're running for president. I begin to wonder, are people, working behind him? Wayne Messam is actually somebody that I think could have sort of the image that they would want to be pushing forward for the presidency. I mean, he is also kind of like a rags to riches story. His father came from Jamaica. He was kind of a sugarcane farmer, and he went on to become a national champion at Florida State, tried out at the NFL, and then, entered into politics. And it's like, once again, very good American dream story. And, I mean, I think overall he's a fairly good public speaker. He could sort of fill the role, because I am someone who is kind of a believer that the president's role is more of an actor's job as opposed to actually putting the platform into action. Because bear in mind, no matter how good you think a candidate is, they're going to be putting that platform through the divided Congress. And that's not an easy thing to do. The things that I would really look for in a presidential candidate would be, how do they do with things like anticipation and decision-making, foresight, their voting record? I mean, it's not only about rhetoric. And we've mentioned this many, many times. The way that you learn about a candidate is not with hours of YouTube, but by finding out who is supporting them financially. Drink some water. I've been drinking water during the recordings lately. I don't like to do it. I just had some bronchitis recently, trying to keep that under control. So, that's the area that we're in right now. That's kind of what we're facing. I mean, when someone starts rising in the polls, and they aren't that well known, I get very skeptical. I began to think that maybe this person is working for somebody else. And somebody like Joe Biden, he rose in the polls very quickly. Do I think that there's some gross conspiracy there? No, not really, not on his part. He's famous. He is the living definition of a famous Democratic politician. He is the establishment. And, Bernie Sanders as well. Not so super establishment. He's still kind of portraying himself as kind of an outsider of the Democratic Party, still listed as an independent in the Senate. But Bernie had an enormous fan base. Bernie had an enormous amount of supporters that were left over from 2016, as well as everyone who's been tuning in to Our Revolution, Nina Turner, all of those things. But it's like, we have to sort of recognize as well that there are people who do sit around and they plot and plan about how they're going to manipulate the political system. And it is done on a very large level. Once again, this isn't like some gross calculated New World Order theory. Have you ever heard of a guy named Richard Nixon? Richard Nixon, I think that this is my personal kind of belief that the single biggest thing that allowed Richard Nixon to become president was when he was actually in Baltimore, Maryland at the time, and they had 100 people from the Republican Party of California sitting around trying to figure out who's going to run for the House of Representatives, who's going to challenge an incumbent Democrat from California. They needed a Republican challenger. And somebody during that meeting with 100 people, California Republican Party, suggested Dick Nixon. And then, he became the candidate. He became vice president under Eisenhower and eventually the president of the United States. people sit around and they think, who can we use? Who's going to be beneficial to our agenda? Who can we put forward as a candidate that is going to make an impact, a candidate that can win? So when someone's telling me that, what are you talking about? Why would some guy like Wayne Messam have, any sort of pre-existing connections, any sort of underlying financial powers that are supporting him? Because that's how it's done. That is how these things operate. It's really not so much like this is a person who has ideas and they're getting a lot of support. They're just catching on like wildfire because of their will to influence people. I'm not saying that that's impossible. Maybe that's still possible. And in my heart, I would like to believe that we can still have somebody rise through the ranks without enormous amounts of political power and connections behind them. But to say that that doesn't happen ever, or to say that you shouldn't be making those comments about somebody who is using political action committees, who is kind of part of a grander scheme of things, it happens all the time. People sit around, they plot and they plan. They're like, how can we use this person? How can we create this sort of attack plan? They do that with these politicians. And the politicians do not always mean what they're saying. Back in 2011, I started listening to a lot of Noam Chomsky, and he was talking about, manufacturing consent, and that was the title of one of his books. And this was on YouTube. I guess it was like a lecture or something, maybe an interview. And he got to some more things about the political process. And he made this comment that you see 8 candidates on a stage, and they're debating each other. But really, they're all on the same side. And then I didn't understand that at first, because I was like, well, it was the 2011 primary again. Those names I mentioned, Ron Paul, Mitt Romney, Rick Santorum, Michelle Bachmann, Herman Cain, all of those people. I was like, well, how can they all be on the same side? Ron Paul is talking about libertarian policies. Mitt Romney is talking about center-right conservatism. And Rick Santorum is very far to the right. He's talking about evangelical stuff. And they all have very different platforms. How can you say that they're all on the same side? You want to know why? Because politicians are liars. Yeah, that's what we mean when you can't just learn about them with hours of YouTube. Because they are saying things that they don't necessarily believe, because they are working for, once again, a super PAC. They're working for existing financial powers. This is how the game functions. So when you see somebody rising in the polls, it's like, I get very, very skeptical of what's happening, especially if they're coming, from a lesser-known background, like we mentioned Pete Buttigieg, Wayne Messam, and to a certain degree, Beto O'Rourke. Because one of the things about Beto is they say that Beto took more money from the fossil fuel industry than any representative in the House during his election in Texas. Although he swears that he took only money from individual contributions, that may or may not be true now. So it's like, big money is behind the scene. Big money is kind of running the game with somebody like Beto O'Rourke. But, what's really going to happen with all that? We don't necessarily know. The Democrats are really at a very pivotal moment. And even if you just want to look at the broadest term of philosophy that is going on in their party, do they go with somebody who's more establishment, like Joe Biden? Do they go with somebody more who's kind of rocking the boat as we speak in Bernie Sanders? It's really up to the Democratic voters to decide. One of the things that I think a lot of people are looking for is they are just saying that even if you entertain the theory that the president's role is an actor's job and you just need somebody with good anticipation, good foresight and decision-making skills, why does it always have to be somebody who's over the age of 68 years old? I mean, Bernie is in his mid-70s. Biden is in his mid-70s. So it's like, not to mention, we currently have the oldest president in the White House ever. Donald Trump took the oath of office at 70 years old, replacing Ronald Reagan and William Henry Harrison. I believe those guys were 69 when they did it. So people are just like, why is our country turning into a gerontocracy? Why is our country run only by the elderly? When somebody like Pete Buttigieg, even though I've just been kind of throwing out skeptical things about him, he's 37. Tulsi Gabbard's 36. Why don't you give these people more of a serious chance? I mean, we've never had a president under the age of 40, I believe. I believe the youngest one was Teddy Roosevelt or something. And he actually got into office, of course, because William McKinley was assassinated. So it's like, there really is a lot of young blood that is running for the presidency. We mentioned Buttigieg and Tulsi Gabbard. Also, Tim Ryan, someone whom I've talked about on this channel multiple times, 45 years old. Tim Ryan is somebody who gives me the impression that he does not have these major existing financial connections because no one is listening to his campaign. I mean, he put out this message on Twitter, and he's just like, hey, please donate so I can get on the debate stage. And somebody started mocking him, and they were like, you got 5 likes in 1 hour from your tweet, and you want to be on the debate stage. And it's like, not many people are listening to him. But that's another thing that we can talk about here as just kind of a concluding note. Another very bland, very mundane form of conspiracy theory. When it's like, sometimes people are running for office, for the presidency, only for national exposure. You might be thinking, well, that's an obvious statement, right? Not exactly. For example, there's been a talk that Tim Ryan could be the running mate for Cory Booker. He wants to get his potential running mate some exposure. And that's why Tim Ryan declared his candidacy at such an awkward time. I was so kind of caught off guard by that, because Tim Ryan was some guy that was visiting Iowa in 2017. And I was like, oh yeah, this guy's definitely going to declare his run for the presidency, like John Delaney did in 2017, like Andrew Yang did in 2017. I thought Tim Ryan might do it right after the 2018 midterms. No, not till the spring of 2019. I was like, no one's listening to him now. No one's paying attention to him now. He could have made a splash, but he didn't. This is another thing that how these kind of interactions can function. Somebody wants to bring their running mate onto the national stage, get them some exposure. Then they're going to be like, okay, I am chosen this person as my running mate, Tim Ryan, Wayne Messam. And then people are like, okay, I know who that guy is. I think the 2016 general election functioned a little differently, whereas Donald Trump chose Mike Pence as his running mate, Hillary Clinton chose Tim Kaine. Both of them were not that well known on the national stage, as well as there were strong supporters of their party, Tim Kaine a Democrat, Mike Pence a Republican, and it's like they were strong supporters of their party, they just fit in nicely, and they didn't carry any extra baggage, because that is one of the biggest regrets of John McCain's entire life, choosing Sarah Palin as his running mate in 2008. One of the biggest regrets of his entire life. He said it himself. It's like, sometimes the VP candidate can carry baggage. Also, though, Sarah Palin was an example of someone who wasn't very well known prior to becoming the VP nominee. I'm sure she was somewhat well known in the western part of the country. I had never heard of her before she was chosen by John McCain to be his vice presidential nod, but it's like, the fact of the matter is, just because somebody is running for president does not mean that they want to win. And it's not even the other thing like someone like Senator Mike Gravel who's just saying, I want to run to bring ideas to the platform. He might be telling the truth on that based on how grassroots his campaign is. And he's 88 years old. It could be like other people. The things we've talked about today. People are running to divide the vote from another candidate. Calculated political strategy. People could be running because they are working for political action committees that have a larger plan. People could be running just to get some name recognition so somebody else will choose them as a vice president. And you know all the rest. People want cabinet positions. People want to sell books. They want a TV show. You know all those. I was hoping today that we could mention a few that maybe don't get that much airtime. And I highly recommend Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent. I mean, like, if you're more of an audio person, they converted that one into a documentary. Maybe it's still on YouTube. It's like some very, eye-opening, insightful stuff. Also just looking at kind of just the nature of how conspiracy theories formulate, and we have to somewhat be aware. This is one of the times that, being a conspiracy theorist is not the craziest thing in the world. It's not the most far-out thing in the world. Because politicians are liars on all sides. Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Green. They don't always tell the truth. They often have a secret agenda. They often have an ulterior motive. And they present the issues in a certain way that is intentionally misleading so that certain people can rise in the power game. Well, that's all for me now. If you have anything to say at all, please drop a comment below. If you like this recording, you can hit the like button. If you have anything to contribute in the comment section, I would love to hear from you. Most importantly, leave some comments so we can discuss. Until next time.